India's new Prime Minister reaches out to an old enemy. Narendra Modi looks to rebuild ties with Pakistan. But can the rivals shake off past differences? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. In Doha, I'm Adrian Finighan. A day after being sworn in, India's new Prime Minister has sat down for talks with his Pakistani counterpart. Nawaz Sharif responded to a surprise invitation to attend Narendra Modi's swearing-in ceremony, the first time that a leader from either side has attended the swearing-in of a leader from the other country. The relationship between the neighbours has been variously frosty to hostile and recently in something of a stalemate. Now, though, the olive branch being offered by India is giving rise to cautious optimism. To our correspondent in Pakistan in just a moment, but first let's hear from Sohail Rahman in New Delhi.
The swearing-in of the 15th Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was a who's who of regional heads of state, ambassadors, civil society and Bollywood stars. Main eyes were on the regional leaders here in South Asia, Hamid Karzai from Afghanistan, Muhammad Nawaz Sharif of Pakistan. We had also the Prime Ministers of Nepal and Bhutan, as well as the Speaker of the House from Bangladesh. And controversially, the invitation was also extended to Mahinda Rajapaksa, the President of Sri Lanka. Tamil politicians in the south of India had boycotted the swearing-in, accusing the Rajapaksa government of atrocities during the civil war that only ended a few years ago of the Tamil minority. However, the ceremony went off very well, and the handshakes and the photo opportunities spoke volumes to the millions of people around the world, and especially those in South Asia, that were watching the body language between the Pakistani and the Indian Prime Ministers. They have indeed had a meeting on Tuesday. It lasted 50 minutes. They've talked about trade and cross-border security. Security, the highlight and the most important thing that India wants to try and clamp down on. They want militancy to stop from Pakistan, and they want their own soldiers not to be the victims of violence, as they call it, from across the border. We'll see what happens over the next few months as to how that relationship develops, but it certainly got off to a very good start.
Here in Pakistan, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's historic visit to New Delhi has certainly gathered a lot of attention. But the reality is most Pakistanis are quite pragmatic about moving forward. They realize that India is a country that this nation has fought 3 wars with. They realize that the relationship between the two militaries is very tense, and that moving forward is going to be difficult. Adding to the challenges is who directs foreign policy in Pakistan. It is not the government, it is not the Prime Minister, it's largely the military. So if the generals don't want to press forward with the normalization efforts that Nawaz Sharif seems to be keen on, the likelihood is it's not going to happen. So while Nawaz Sharif is certainly optimistic that he can improve things with his new counterpart in New Delhi, Narendra Modi, he has a very fine line that he can walk.
So can India and Pakistan shrug off the weight of history that's been building over the years? Let's bring in our guests on today's programme. From New Delhi, we're joined by Nalin Kohli, spokesman for India's ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, the BJP. Joining us from Islamabad, Talat Masood, a security and defence analyst and a retired general in the Pakistani Army. And also from New Delhi, Salman Haider, former Indian Foreign Secretary and Ambassador. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us on Inside Story. We'll start with you, Nalin Kohli. Explain for us the significance of Mr. Sharif's visit to India and the talks between the two leaders on day one of Mr. Modi's premiership.
Well, I think, Adrian, there are 2 or 3 points to flag. The first is the invitation went out to all the SAARC countries and Mauritius, and we are happy that the grace was shown and the leaders did respond. Of course, a lot of focus is on Pakistan, as would be expected, but that doesn't mean that the talks haven't taken place in a sort of an informal meet kind of way, because with the other leaders too. With regard to Pakistan, I think it was a good occasion, and it was good of Pakistan to respond also, and Mr. Sharif to come to India. Of course, foreign secretary level talks are there, and I think one would expect a structured movement in terms of moving ahead. This could be treated as a preliminary kind of an exercise, because the government came into existence only yesterday, and it's just about 24 hours since the government is there. So expecting major policy decisions or outcomes, as some media analysts were expecting, would have been a little premature.
Talat Masood, how is this visit playing out in the media there in Pakistan? There was intense debate about whether Mr. Sharif should go to New Delhi, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think there were differences as far as his going to India were concerned. The fundamentalists and those who are opposed to having good relations with India were very much opposed to Mr. Nawaz Sharif's going, and that is why he took a decision. He took time to take this decision, but I think he took a wise decision by going to India, because he was nothing to lose by going, but there was a lot to lose by not going. So I think he took a bold decision. And I think the military also ultimately was supportive of the fact that he should go to India, although there were rumors that the military was not was somewhat opposed, but I don't think so. I think they realized that they have to focus more on the internal threat, and it would be a wise decision to have a good relationship with India, or at least a peaceful relationship with India. And they are also wanting to focus more on the economy as far as Pakistan is concerned, and also to focus more on the internal threat. And that is only possible if the relations with India are cordial, or at least peaceful, so that they can give greater attention to internal problems and internal challenges.
Salman Haider, we heard about the intense debate there that was raging in Pakistan before Mr. Sharif's visit. What was being made of it there in India?
Well, there was no great concern about the debate in Pakistan, but there was a real wish to see Mr. Nawaz Sharif here in Delhi to sort of round out the inaugural celebrations, where his presence was, of course, a very important one. And I think that he's been given, his presence here has been treated with due, what should we say, seriousness and acceptance, and is regarded as an important element in this in the beginning days of the new government. It was, as someone pointed out a moment ago, it came as something of a surprise, because to reach out in the way in which Mr. Modi did, not only to Pakistan, but to all other members of SAARC, all of whom responded, enhanced the occasion greatly. It was something which is unusual, but was greatly welcomed in India. There were some dissenting voices about the presence of the Pakistani leader, but not of a sort that compelled any kind of rethinking on the part of Modi, or Mr. Modi, and his party. So I think on the whole, one can say quite rightly that this has been a good start to a new phase of this very important relationship between India and Pakistan.
Nalin Kohli, a good start. Do you agree? Is this the beginning of a new era in relations between India and Pakistan?
Well, we've had differences, we've had troubles, and it's a complicated relationship. But at the same time, to say it's the beginning of a new era, we should, I wouldn't like to raise the bar of expectations. And I think the idea is to keep moving ahead and seeing where we get to some common ground. And while we raised, of course, and our Foreign Secretary, Mr. Sujata, said that we had flagged the issue of cross-border terrorism, we had flagged other concerns that we have. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif did bring in a few points and said we owe it to the 1.5 billion people of the subcontinent peace. So he spoke about cooperation rather than confrontation. And I think, generally what we would expect from this sort of a preliminary meeting that took place on a very, the celebration of democracy, if I may say, because India is the largest democracy in the world, and the graciousness shown by the SAARC region and in Mr. Sharif in particular, to come down here, it was a good start, something certainly that we should hope to build on.
Talat Masood, many in Pakistan are suspicious of Prime Minister Modi's links to the RSS, a Hindu supremacist group, aren't they? In fact, suspicious of the BJP in general.
That's very true. This is one of the things which makes people in Pakistan somewhat wary about the future of relationship. But we think, this is somewhat optimism on our part, we think that as a Prime Minister of India, he would be far more inclusive, both towards the region, towards Pakistan as well, and as towards the minorities in India. So I think he will be somewhat a different person to what he was, or what at least his past betrays about him. So I would look with some sort of optimism that I think he understands that he has a problem and he has a stigma and he needs to remove that. And the best way of doing that is to move forward with countries like Pakistan and to prove that he is a different person, and he is now the Prime Minister of India who has who wants to improve relations with its neighbors, not only for the good of the neighbors, but primarily for the good of India as well. Because if he has to really focus on the economy and bring about a qualitative change in the lives of the people of India, then it's extremely important that he really has good relations with Pakistan. And similar is the thrust of the Pakistani Prime Minister, that he wants to focus on the economy, and he also wants to focus on the internal threat. And this is only possible if we have good relations with India and Afghanistan, and also, of course, with Iran. So I think that there is a dynamic at the moment in the region which does give an incentive for all the leaders to have a different approach towards each other.
All right, Nalin Kohli, you want to make a brief point?
I don't think Mr. Modi really needs to prove anything, or this relationship between India and Pakistan is an opportunity for him to prove something. I think that would be grossly incorrect. With regards to the perception of a stigma, I think Mr. Modi has been quite a vilified person. And if you would really go by what he's been saying consistently after taking oath and before taking oath, people probably wore spectacles of a certain perception and built, this is how they want to see it. And many things that have happened over the last few weeks runs contrary to that perception. So, and I'll give you an example. He speaks about inclusivity and says this is a government of 125 crore people, as we say in India, or such a large number, 1.2 billion, and that means it's an inclusive government. But certainly the economy is there, and to kickstart further the Indian economy, there are many things we look internally. However, even having said so, the fact that there should be peace in the region is an important objective, and without peace there can't be development, there can't be regional cooperation. We recognize that. But I would not agree with that contention at all, that he's going to do this to prove something. Least of all he needs to do is prove his credentials to Pakistan or another country. The people of India have elected him as the Prime Minister, and he is the Prime Minister of India.
Okay. Well, it's hard to imagine a time when India and Pakistan have not been rivals. There have been flashpoints and flare-ups ever since the partition of the subcontinent in 1947, when Britain dismantled its Indian empire. 2 wars have been fought over the disputed region of Kashmir in 1947 and 1965. Both countries continue to lay claim to the entire state. A 3rd war was waged in 1971 over East Pakistan, which would later become independent Bangladesh. India tested its first nuclear device in 1974, marking the start of an arms race. It escalated dramatically in 1998 when both sides carried out a series of nuclear tests. A formal peace process was launched in 2004, but the 2008 attacks on Mumbai, blamed on Pakistani fighters, set back any advances. Salman Haider, I want to tap into your experience as a diplomat and India's foreign secretary here, and introduce the elephant in the room here, Kashmir. Will Prime Minister Modi, do you think, be willing to work towards talks on resolving that particular issue?
Well, Kashmir has been spoken about at some length by the outgoing special representative of Mr. Dr. Manmohan Singh's government, who has been engaged in back-channel talks with his counterpart from Pakistan for quite some time. And I think the picture he gave was that the quiet talks, which have remained outside the public gaze, have actually taken matters a good way forward. A 4-point solution of a 4-point formula has been spoken of. on this occasion and on earlier occasions, which suggests that genuine progress has been made in order to settle and the differences between the two sides. And it can't be said that the differences have been settled, or that this 4-point formula has any kind of official imprimatur, but it is still a considerable advance on what we have been used to in earlier days. And I think that the possibility of returning to this kind of formula, to a process of quiet discussion, of taking it further, of trying to see how what is privately agreed can now become part of the public discourse, because obviously in order to have any real impact and to fix the issue, the public has to be part of it. It can't just be done as a private, and however, at whatever elevated level it may be, the leaders alone would need to, on this very sensitive matter, would need to take the issue to the public in both countries. So this is something that remains, and that where some encouragement can be taken from what has been achieved in the last few years, and it's been a fairly prolonged process, but more needs to be done, and let us see if the two leaders can take up this issue.
General Masood, you spoke earlier about Pakistan's military giving its tacit approval to Mr. Sharif's trip to New Delhi. Now, in the past, the military has resisted any rapprochement with India that doesn't include a resolution of the Kashmir issue. When the former Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, took his bus trip to Lahore, the Pakistani military took the Kargil Heights, and Mr. Sharif, who was Prime Minister back then, claimed to know nothing about it. I suppose that the key here is the Pakistani military, isn't it?
Absolutely, but now I think things have changed, and the military realizes that it made a huge mistake on Kargil, although they don't admit it publicly, but it's true that General Musharraf also thinks that he made a huge mistake. And I don't think that would ever be repeated, hopefully never. Now, of course, as far as the army is concerned, the military is concerned, they would like that there should be a movement between India and Pakistan on the positive side, because it does not suit them if the relationship remains hostile and the LOC remains volatile, because they have to focus on the internal threat. It's a huge engagement of the Pakistan military at the moment with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and other militant groups. So it's a great challenge. In fact, it could be even termed as an existential challenge. So Pakistan does need to focus on that. Besides that, of course, the economy side, unless the economy of Pakistan improves, and that will only happen if there is peace, the defense of Pakistan would never be supported the way that the military wants it to be supported. So there are 2 or 3 factors which do give hope that the military will totally sort of converge as far as moving forward with India is concerned. But obviously they would like the Kashmir problem and others, because they are a conservative institution, and like many in Pakistan think that the best thing would be that if there is also a forward movement on the fundamental issues that bedevil the relationship, and these of course include the Kashmir problem, and then there are some relatively not that important but still very important, the Siachen and the Sir Creek problem and the water issue. If these could also move forward, then I think things will really be more enduring.
Salman Haider, I'm sure you'd agree that India's interests in Afghanistan have a bearing on its relationship with Pakistan. How will India learn to trust Pakistan again? Will it be able to cooperate, for instance, on Afghanistan security issues?
That may be, that's a big question, and I really don't have a ready answer for it. I would be surprised if India and Pakistan can readily cooperate on security issues relative to Afghanistan. But I would expect that Afghanistan itself would have much to say on this subject. And I think that we should be led by our Afghan friends in this matter. They are not looking to either India or Pakistan at this stage to underwrite security matters in their country, but they do not want disturbances from abroad, which can unsettle their own efforts to bring peace and stability to a country which has been very badly damaged in the last several years. So I think that I would like to see, I would imagine that the lead must be taken by Kabul, and I would expect that Islamabad and Delhi should look carefully to that source.
Talat Masood, do you concur with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think it would be very good for both the countries, because otherwise it could cause great instability in Afghanistan, and that will have a very negative fallout on Pakistan itself. So a cooperative approach between India and Pakistan could do a lot for the development of Afghanistan and for the stability of the region as a whole.
Nalin Kohli, Prime Minister Modi issued some veiled threats to Pakistan during his election campaign. Was that purely the language of the campaign trail? Is that going to help or hinder his efforts to reset relations with Pakistan?
One is, I think, one needs to bear in mind that issues raised during an election are in context of the election, and they would also be in terms of what are the concerns. Now, the second part about it